our next speaker, and Alex is co-founder of Stauning Whisky and currently the CMO responsible for marketing, sales, and product development. And yeah, we'd love to hear your story, Alex. So without further ado, over to you.
Thank you very much. Yes, as you said, my name is Alex. I'm one of the 9 founders of Stauning Whisky. Stauning Whisky is a small distillery. Well, it was a small, now it's a bit bigger. It started in 2005. We're 9 friends that met up in Jutland, the west coast in Denmark, and actually discussed how to make whiskey. 9 friends. Well, 9 friends is a lot of friends starting up a distillery, and you might ask yourself, that must be impossible. Actually, I think it was one of the good parts of being together. 9 people, 9 different people that actually made it work with Stauning Whisky. And 9 people is probably the essence of this. So we're 4 engineers. I'm a construction engineer, and then we are a chef and a butcher and a teacher and a helicopter pilot and a doctor. So 9 very different people. And the doctor, Martin, was the person that initially got the idea of starting Stauning Whisky. He was in a car driving to a small island in the south part of Denmark when he heard a radio program about whiskey. And in that program, they said it's easy to make whiskey, but it's difficult to make a good whiskey. And Denmark is not a traditional whiskey country. And Martin was thinking about this and went to this summer house, talked to his family, and said, "Why don't we try to make the first Danish whiskey?" The first Danish whiskey was made in 1952 or something like that, but he didn't know. So this curiosity, and can you make whiskey in Denmark, was actually what led us to start Stauning Whisky. So the family, 5 persons sitting in the summer house, discussed, what is whiskey? And then they made a list of 25 people that they could think of, that could contribute into making this whiskey distillery. And luckily, I was studying engineering together with Martin's younger brother, Lasse. So they put me on the list. And I remember they called me up and said, "So, Alex, would you like to help us start up the first Danish whiskey distillery?" And at that point of time in 2005, I was about to start playing handball or golf or something like that. And this was just so much more fun to start a whiskey distillery. So I think starting Stauning Whisky was coincidence. And if Martin had called up and said to Alex, "Would you like to help start making cheese?" It would probably be cheese today. So we didn't have a clear why in the beginning. Well, the why was, can we make whiskey in Denmark? We met up a couple of weeks later on, and I think we were 14 people in Martin's house and discussed what is whiskey. And Martin and Jesper and Lasse, the 3 brothers, part of the distillery, had made this PowerPoint presentation about whiskey. Very, very simple presentation. And it was, looking at this presentation, it was super easy to make whiskey. So why not start? I think there's been some of the good things about being part of Stauning Whisky. It's that everybody is just keen on trying new things. We're not afraid on taking on your problems and trying out to find the better solutions. Can you innovate and do it easier? Can we do different kinds of whiskey? So we're probably not very traditional in the world of whiskey, which is I think the most important thing about Stauning today. But in the beginning, we actually wanted to make Scotch whiskey, whiskey similar to Ardbeg from 1977. We tasted this whiskey at the first Danish whiskey trade show, and it was absolutely amazing. This peat-smoked Ardbeg. So when we started up, we agreed, so let's try to do this from basics, old school. Let's go back in history. What is whiskey? And with the 4 engineers and a helicopter pilot and a doctor and all these different people, we had our different angles into making the whiskey. And we agreed on not closing down projects, but opening up. That was basics in the beginning. Let's try it out. Don't say no, only say yes, which was sometimes a bit hard and a bit tough. But most it actually worked pretty well. So we needed a place to start up making whiskey, and Munch, the father of the 3 brothers, was a butcher. So we had this abattoir, and we can start up making whiskey in this old abattoir. We need a food permit, and this place could give us the food permit, the abattoir. So we used all the things you actually, the machine for making minced meat. We could grind the grain, the oven where you could smoke the meat, you could smoke the grain. So we picked up some local peat. We got the farmer to grow the grain, his father-in-law to Simon, one of the other engineers. And then we kind of started up like they did 200 years ago. So floor malting, the best way of learning is doing. So starting from scratch, floor malting, making a beer, distilling this beer, and doing it, our own way of making whiskey. We still do that this day, but scaling up, it needed some innovation. I'll come back to that later on. So shortly after this first distill, we met one of the biggest whiskey importers in Denmark, and they were absolutely amazed about our new make. And they had a whiskey expert that said, international whiskey expert that said it was probably the most interesting new maker to become whiskey that he had ever tasted in his 30 years in the whiskey industry. And we should not fool around by doing this as a hobby. And this was only to be a hobby. We had no intention of making money on this, maybe selling 1 or 2 bottles, but actually the basics was creating whiskey to ourselves. So we agreed to make 200 to 400 liters of whiskey per year. And that, at that time we were 9 people left. 5 had left the group because this was becoming too expensive and too time consuming. And I think there was a wife or 2 that thought that there was too much alcohol involved in this project, which was probably true, but it was fun. So he said, why don't you try to make a real whiskey distillery, a proper whiskey distillery, and I'll help you do tastings, laboratories, tests, guide you in the right direction. And why don't you, instead of making a copy of a single malt whiskey, a Scotch single malt whiskey, why don't you try to make your own whiskey? For example, a rye whiskey. Denmark is a big rye country. And we were like, rye, rye that's American. American is Las Vegas, poker, striptease, stuff like that. That's not us. We want to make traditional Scotch. But after some time, doing testing and trials, we actually came to the conclusion that it could be fun to do a rye whiskey. And as we didn't know anything about whiskey, and really we didn't know anything about whiskey when we started this project. The rye whiskey was made the way you make a single malt whiskey, because we didn't know that normally when you make a rye whiskey, you do it a completely different way, different kind of production. So again, we did floor malting, double distilling, everything like a single malt whiskey. And that gave some fantastic, sweet flavors into the whiskey that, and again, we didn't know in the beginning. The new make, was it good? Was it bad? It tasted quite good. The single malt was smoky, fantastic, different to the smoky whiskeys you see today. The rye whiskey was sort of floral, sweet, not too spicy and dusty. So that kind of fueled our interest into this whiskey, going on, keeping on, and spent more evenings and really going deep into the process of making whiskey and trying to make it work better. So we kept on doing this, and we started. Then in 2007, we invested in a small farm in Jutland because we needed to scale up the business. So a small farm, got a loan, personal loans, couldn't get a bank to loan us any money because this was the middle of the financial crisis. So we needed to go home, ask our family wives, can we borrow some more money? Can we go to a bank and sell the car, sell the house, whatever, and get some more money? And we did that and got some funds so we can buy this farm and buy some equipment, start up small again. 2009, we were finished renovating, doing our first batch, first real batch, the first real distillery. And shortly after, I think 1 or 2 years later, we, the whiskey expert we had been discussing this, we said, this is amazing. 24-month-old rye whiskey, this tastes like really amazing stuff. You should sell it. You can't call it whiskey because it needs to be 3 years old. But sell it, start selling, getting more cash into the company. And as you probably know, most of you, age is very important in whiskey. And with a 2-year-old spirit that wasn't old enough to become a whiskey, we actually said, okay, let's change this. turn it all around. Let's call it a young rye. Instead of focusing on the age in being old, let's focus on selling a young whiskey. And again, a lot of people said, "Oh, you can't do this. This is ridiculous. A Danish whiskey, and now it's young. That's even more ridiculous. Won't be a success." And all that, questions to success and not being good or being Danish actually kept us going. Really became a drive to us. How can we do this even better? So we really worked much harder, innovated, getting a better yield. Focused even more on different kinds of whiskey. So the next whiskey we made was actually called a chaos. So a blend, a vatting of different casks of single malt and rye whiskey became our chaos whiskey. And more people said, that's even more ridiculous. That's just stupid. And again, it fueled us, let's try even harder. We love this. We love when people hate us. But the taste was amazing. I remember we went into a competition in the UK, and they actually said this tastes like the original Scotch whiskey, the old Scotch whiskey, the chaos. It reminds me so much of the old Scotch whiskey. So flavors was okay. Kind of the brand. Wanted to change the whiskey world. We didn't want to copy a Scotch or Irish or American style whiskey. We wanted to create a Nordic whiskey, a Danish whiskey. And it became more the focus of creating our own type of whiskey than copying the whiskies made in other parts of the world. And in 2012, I think we had a peak year so far. Noma, the restaurant in Copenhagen that was voted, I think, world's best restaurant 4 years in a row. We made up with them, and they said, this is amazing what you're doing. I really like your style, and it's different, and taste is very impressive. How about we change, throw out all the whiskeys in a restaurant and only take in your Nordic whiskey, your Danish whiskey, your different styles. And that really, started up things in Europe and then also in the world. So we kind of started working together with restaurants, cocktail bars, trying to focus even more on making our own style whiskey, changed our production. We had some issues with the mashing, making a rye whiskey with double distilling with a lauter ton is super hard. Didn't work very well, had a very low yield. So we invented our own mash tun, a kind of a washing machine. You should go to our website and take a look at some of the pictures. I remember when people from outside Denmark, distillers from other countries, master distillers or distillery owners, came to see our floor malting with our machine that made the floor malting automatically, because the monkey shoulder was too hard to do by hand. We invented a machine that could turn the grain, both spray water on the grain, on the grain, and turn the grain, so we could keep an even temperature in the grain. Our mash tun, they were laughing. I remember they were like, "This is stupid." Walking around the distillery, they started smiling. And after an hour, 2 hours, they were like, "This is brilliant." Different approach onto making whiskey, not copying what the rest of the world are doing. Maybe the yield is not high, but the flavors are, very different. It is a Nordic. It is not comparable to other types of whiskey. So we kept on working. We hired in an extra person in production. I remember in the beginning it was only Munch, the butcher, that worked in production. Then we hired in an entrepreneur. He was, what do you call this? Not a bricklayer, but a craftsman. Second person in production. And we were very focused on not hiring in an expert or a brewer or something like that, or somebody from a laboratory. We needed somebody with a clear mindset, not being focused on how to do things or how you usually do things. We need to be able to kind of create this person or help him into the world of whiskey. So Herluf, the second person, started up, and then I started in 2013 as managing director, because now people in Denmark really were looking towards the west coast of Denmark. So a lot of people came to the distillery, and we could get extra cash in, and by doing guided tours at the distillery. And in Denmark, we have very, very not so strict, when making a whiskey distiller. So people can go in and taste the grain, taste the new make. It wasn't locked away like it is in other countries. They trust us in Denmark that we don't cheat. And often people said after leaving the distillery, so this is actually the first time we understand whiskey distilling, how it's done from the field to the bottle. We only used local grain, both rye and barley, local farmers. It was a bit more expensive using the local grain. It was tough to tell the farmers how to grow this grain because usually they just grew it for beer or bread. Now they had to do it for whiskey. So suddenly we had the whole community supporting us because we supported them, buying the grain, extra high price. They didn't want to grow the rye because they couldn't get a lot of money for rye. So we actually said, okay, you'll get extra money for growing your rye because we need the rye for whiskey. Suddenly people starting moving to the area. This is the west coast Denmark. This is the outskirts of Denmark. This is not a place where people move to. It's often a place where people move from, to Copenhagen, Aarhus. Suddenly people started moving to this area and was focused and interested about Stauning whiskey. Then in 2013, 14, we came to had to take a big decision because our spirits was sold out very, very quickly. Again, Ali told you about Amazon, Facebook, all these Shopify, fantastic things we have today, but it can also be a problem. I think our website broke down 4 times in a row, oversold products. We had to call up people and say they couldn't buy a bottle because it was sold out. We oversold by 700 bottles. I remember one time, went to the news, this small distillery, bottles went up in price. So I think we were also lucky that sometimes things went wrong, and I was lucky for us. And you need some luck being a founder-led company, going into the world. Then in end of 13, Distillery Ventures approached us. And we knew at that point of time that we needed to scale up production because we couldn't keep up production and sales. And we had talked to a bank, getting a loan was too expensive. We had talked to a few rich guys that had sold their companies, but we were afraid that they wanted to decide too much. You could sell stock, public stock, and then you would suddenly had 1,000 people that wanted to decide. So we were actually not sure at that point of time what to do and how to scale up the business. And then we met Distillery Ventures, and took a long time to do a partnership with them because we really wanted to make sure that we could control what we were doing. This is our small baby, which is very important for us that we control the company. We decide every day. We do sales, we do logistics, everything is still something that we do ourselves in the company. But the big difference here with Distillery Ventures and Diageo is that we get clever money, as we put it. So not just a bank, not just 1,000 people wanting to see you grow and make more money to them. You could actually call up a person, in Scotland, and get him to Denmark if we had a problem with fermentation or something like that. Because again, scaling up is difficult when you go from 30,000 liters per year to now 700,000 liters per year. It's a big scale up, and it's super difficult to imagine what can happen when you go to bigger washbacks or when you change your stills. We had direct heated stills, which is not very common a lot of places today. What will happen when you go to different kind of copper, slightly bigger stills? We have 24 pot stills today because we were afraid to go to too big stills. 24 direct heated stills. Getting that information from Abercrombie, old producers of pot stills, it's just very, very important to get the access to that kind of information. So we were not sorry about doing that. And now I know Ali, and Ali is good at marketing, helping us finding distributors, getting information about new markets. If we want to buy casks, they can source the market and help us with pricing and contact bourbon distilleries, so get direct access into the best casks. So So things like that help us a lot in our daily work today. And we're still trying to innovate and create new things. We can focus on the business instead of focusing on disturbing details. As Ali also said, there's a lot of things. There's a lot of people that want to do things with us. There's a lot of information. So there's a lot of people that want to sell things to us. And you can keep your head pretty clear, and you have somebody you can ask that can assist you in finding out what is good and what is bad. So that's been really, really nice having DV, Digital Ventures, and Diageo on the side. This year we were voted, or we won as Brand Innovator of the Year in World Whisky's Awards. So I guess that's a sign that we are still on the right track. We're still doing what we are good at and keeping focus. Now we're hiring in people. So far, still no people from the industry in Stauning Whisky. The latest person we've hired in is for marketing. Now I'm getting too busy personally, so I've hired in a person from the beer industry, from Carlsberg in marketing. And we will probably get more people from the industry when we look into marketing and sales. We see there we need some expertise that you don't find with people doing marketing in paint or screws or other things. We need people that has the experience within spirits or beer. So a great journey, I must say, and looking forward to the next many years to come. I see my time is spent now, Dave. I better stop. I could do this for hours, but there's probably already questions.
You're okay. That was fascinating. I loved the story, particularly around how people saying that's not Danish or this is ridiculous just fueled you guys even more. And I love the bits about the impact you had on the community, and also the bit about hiring decisions and how you actually consciously decided not to take on people from the industry because you wanted to be different. So that was really, it was really, really interesting. So thank you. Thank you very much. We did have a couple of questions again during the week, and I know we're going over a little bit, but you touched on a lot of the hustle that you needed to get to where you got to, and all the setbacks and some of the pushback you received. But one of the questions, again, it was similar to the question to Ali, but like advice you would have to people starting out the journey. And I know Ali talked about how whiskey is probably harder given the lead time for how long it needs to be brewed for, or whatever the term is. But again, advice to people starting out on this type of journey with a food or drink brand, what would you say?
Well, I guess two of the most important things in Stauning is, believe in yourself and believe in your ideas. You will meet a lot of resistance and people doubting you, and people saying it's not good enough, but stick to your ideas and the original idea of doing this. It's probably the most important thing. And Ali also mentioned, partnerships. We've done a lot of partnerships during the last 15 years. And often not partnerships involving money. Often it's just helping out, helping each other. That's really fed our innovation and ideas and getting help. So partnership with the beer industry and food industry has been really, really good for our brand and build our brand in different ways. Because often a lot of people won't see your whiskey if they don't like whiskey. But if you, for example, we do a cheese with one of the best cheese manufacturers, or how to say that in Denmark. So whiskey in a cheese, and won different competitions. And when people see it like whiskey, Danish whiskey and cheese, or sell your casks to the beer industry, so they put on the bottle from Stauning Whisky. So all these partnerships, different ways, where you can learn and where you can feed your brand to other segments is very, very important.
Great. Yeah, that's really good. Last question, Alex. We actually talked about this before we joined the call, but where is the whiskey market going now? We talked a little bit about the change in demographics and also higher consumption in females than it had been before, but where are you seeing it over the next few years, and what's changing?
So we see a huge change in which people are drinking whiskey. It seems like the young generation now is more open to trying new things. But often you also see them not sticking to one brand, but trying out different brands. Also more women are drinking whiskey. So I will see, you probably see a lot of smaller brands coming up now, winning market shares. But especially brands that are good at branding themselves and their personality or their special style, because people want to see special things and not just the same. Often also in Denmark we have a lot of whiskey distilleries now, and they copy Scotch or Irish or a Japanese style of whiskeys, which is fun. Of course it's a good whiskey, it's great whiskey, but you're fighting the industry. Instead of trying to make your own path,
make something new.
Yeah. So I think they will see it's quite much more uphill, trying to break through than the brands that are better or in doing something different.